Good. All right. All right. So we're live. Today we'll be book one. It's written by Anthony Johns. I can't make out any of the pictures on this book. There's six figures of person on this book. I'm not sure if you know any of them. The one in the middle, well, let's just say I haven't read this book before. So we'll be learning about great Jamaicans. And there are a lot of great Jamaicans through history. So in the table of content, it goes through first great attorney at law, and then the man who made land dry, the first native knight, the girl from Santa Cruz, the girl with the healing hands, the first Anglican bishop. So it deals with six figures as was seen on the cover. And the introduction or forward, because it's another name to call introduction, forward. All right. So it says, this is a collection of 6 stories in this book. The first in the series was Lives of Great Jamaicans. These persons are from humble beginnings who have made their contributions to Jamaica and the world. And this would fall under social studies or the category civics, Jamaican civics. In this book, we present 4 men, 2 women, all who lived in the first half of the 20th century. So that is the 1900s. They were part of the development of Jamaica from a British colony to its independence. Their success was gained by certain value which they learned as bright young children and practiced throughout their careers. Others were love of learning, discipline, hard work, imagination, and dedication. From different fields of service were Una Morrison, journalism, Bishop Mary Gore, religion, Honorable Hector Joseph's law, Honorable Sir Harold Allen, teaching and politics, Claude Bell, engineering, Reverend Percival Gibson, religion and teaching. These fields of service are very well known to most Jamaicans, teachers, and children. Their examples should therefore be a positive impact on our thinking. And did I tell you who the art of this book is? It is, just in case I missed it, Anthony Johnson. All right. So the first person is Hector Joseph, who lived 1871 to 1936, and this is a portrait of Hector Joseph. He was head of state, was a king, so it would be KC instead of QC, which is now council. So he was Honorable Hector Joseph, KC. It says Jamaica's first great attorney at law. Hector Joseph was born on a farm in St. Andrew in 1871. The main district was called Matilda's Corner, but the large properties were nearby estate were Hope Estate and Barbican Estate. Today, the area is a part of the city of Kingston, but in those days, the city was far away. I guess the city had grown and expanded to reach Matilda's Corner. As a boy, he had to help his father in the pineapple fields. His father was named Hector, and so they called the boy Junior. And his father was Mas Hector or Mr. Hector. The boy was very bright at school. His father then decided to send him to the best schools he could find. At school in St. Anne, that's the next chapter in Hector's life. Mr. Hector went to the minister of his church, and who told him that the best school was far away in the parish of St. Anne. It was named York Castle. And York Castle is in the town of Brownstown, St. Anne. And it was a part of his church. Mr. Hector started to save his money to pay the school fees. He asked the Methodist minister to get Junior into York Castle High School. When he was 12, Junior was sent off to the country to school. St. Anne was very cold, and he did not see any of his friends or cousins at night. He cried when he remembered his mother and father had hoped that they would soon see him again. In the days, he studied very hard because his father told him that that was very important. When he was 19, he first came in he came first in the island in the overseas examination and won the Jamaica scholarship. Many people did not believe that the grandson of a slave could be so bright, but the people were very glad, especially his teachers at York Castle, because in those days the traditional high school was full with mostly European children, the remnants of the plantocracy. So even today, in a lot of prep schools, you see a lot of fair or lighter looking uh, Jamaicans, but this was a pioneer in that field. So they were very glad, especially the teachers at York Castle, that he excelled. Soon after, York Castle closed due to a lack of money. After he won a scholarship, he had to go to England because there were no universities in Jamaica at that time. He was very sad because he had to leave warm, sunny Jamaica to live in a cold, great country such as England. The university was at Cambridge, and it was one of the oldest and best schools in the world. A lot of politicians and even global leaders today, like current state and prime minister, either went to Cambridge or Oxford because they are traditional universities, very old institutions. In his first year, he came first in his studies, and all of Jamaica was proud that Jamaica could beat the brightest boys in England. So you can imagine a farmer enslaved descendant colony send one of their students to supersede and excel, surpassing that of the top minds in England at that time. This was a great, and they don't teach this type of thing in school because this is the first time I heard about this particular attorney. But he topped his class at Cambridge, so he was the brightest boy in among the brightest boys in the country, or in fact the world at that time, because of the prestige of that university. In 1896, Hector came first in law examination. At that time, was not the first only for Cambridge, but for all students from over the world. So this guy, a Jamaican, came first all over the world in his field of law. So when you check all the university grades from the entire world, the university at those times, there was a little Jamaican boy who went to York Castle High School from impoverished background in Kingston, who grew up on a farm in 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 in, in the central Kingston, went on to become the leading attorney in the world, the entire world. When he returned to Jamaica, he worked as an attorney with the government. When he was 40, he was named a King Counsel, and he used the title KC. He was one of the first Jamaicans to receive the honor. And once more, Jamaicans rejoiced. So he was among the first Jamaicans to become a King Counsel. So he was advisor to the King of England then, who was probably King George at that time. Next chapter, working in Guyana. In 1924, he was appointed Attorney General in Guyana. Jamaicans were too proud of this. This position had only been given to Englishmen, so he was the first person of African descent to be named Attorney General in the country of Guyana. So that was a big hallmark as well. The Attorney General is the senior attorney in a country and is expected to advise the government in the most difficult points of law. So he was advisor to the king, and he was advisor to the government of Guyana. In Guyana, they doubted that Hector knew enough for the job, but they soon found out he knew more than all the other attorneys. He became very popular in Guyana, which was then called British Guyana because it was still a British colony like Jamaica. However, there was a big problem to be solved. They asked Hector Joseph to solve it. However, the people in Jamaica were not happy that their bright son of the soil was not given this honor in his own land. And there's a saying that a man is not often crowned king in his own country, similar to Marcus Garvey by that claim So it's similar to Hector Joseph, who unfortunately had to get this honor in Guyana instead of Jamaica. So the British government was to send him home, and soon Hector Joseph was home again. He became the president of the J3As, that's the Jamaica Amateur Athletics Association. They are responsible for, but amateur athletics, it's normally at a level that you don't get in terms of contracts to do it amateur athletics at that time. And those people would represent the country in Olympics versus a pro athlete association, which would have sponsorships that weren't eligible to go to the Olympics. And he and the Young Men's Christian Association was also president of that. He was not appointed Chief Justice. That's the position that he hoped he would have gotten. Then, because he didn't get it, in 1930 he returned to Guyana. There he was appointed to act as Chief Justice. So he still wasn't being recognized for his genius in Guyana. So as Chief Justice of Guyana in that time, it would be similar to what we call the Prime Minister. No, because if he's just below the governor, which would be like equivalent to the Governor General, being the Chief Justice, which is just below the governor, he would be like the native Prime Minister of that country. And how, you might ask, it would be equivalent. Even today, any member of a Commonwealth nation can run for member of parliament in another Commonwealth nation. So, for example, someone born in Guyana can run for MP or Prime Minister in Jamaica, as long as it's a Commonwealth realm. Then, again, he proved that he could get the job done. When he came home, he was getting very old and ill, and he died in 1936. At this time, there were many other famous attorneys in Jamaica, and all of them paid him tribute. Hector Joseph was our first great attorney at law. Awesome story. And the second is Claude Bell. And this is a portrait of Claude Bell. And he lived from 1871 to 1936. So it's basically the same lifespan as Hector Joseph. See? Same exact lifespan that they both live. Same years. Yeah. So these two great Jamaicans lived in the same time. So I guess this chapter would have started in this era and it moved on. So the man who made land dry, the Holy Bible tells us that God created everything on earth. The sea, the dry land, and the air, and all things that we can see and feel. How then can a man create dry land? The answer is simple. In many places, there are land which are covered by water and which cannot be used because they always have mud. And these are called swamps. Some people are able to clear these lands and use them to build houses or plant food crops. When a man causes many acres of swampland to be cleared, he is considered to be a great man. He allows many people to plant food crops and build houses. Next chapter is in the army in Egypt. Some years ago, there was a great man in Jamaica named Claude Bell who knew how to drain swamps and made land dry. He was born in the district of Retreat in the parish of St. Mary in 1890. 1890. That was over 100 years ago. And as a boy, he attended the Titchfield School in Portland. This is a very great school. A lot of successful people attended Titchfield. A lot of successful people, and they're very good in school challenge quiz and a lot of. Titchfield is a great institution. School in Portland. He later joined the army during World War I. With many other Jamaicans, he was sent to Egypt, which is in Africa. They saw the pyramids and other wonders of the world. He had worked very hard in the army, even though it was very hot. Because in Egypt, there's a large desert. Egypt in the Sahara, so it's very hot. And there's hardly any rain there. All the water comes from the Great Nile River. In the army, he learned about tools, machinery, and how to build roads and houses. He was an honest man, and people trusted him. So when he returned to Jamaica, he was given jobs like making swamps into dry land. And other people were afraid to do this type of job. So because of while while in the military, while enlisted in the military overseas during World War One in Egypt, and how they had done the Nile Delta, how they had to draw the resources of the water of the Nile Delta. He had brought those skills back to Jamaica to make development of land. And today we can see or quantify that word because we know where I am now could have been swampland because it's a relatively low-lying area. But because it's over 100 years ago, all of that work that is put in, that he put in, we are seeing the use of that now. So we have this agricultural lands, we have lands that's designed for housing, the whole planning of that time. So it's a major part of the development of the country as far back as 100 years ago. And he would often be called to solve many difficult problems and help people. In Jamaica, when Jamaica got great problems in 1938, people said they wanted more jobs and higher pay and better living conditions. So they gathered in the streets and refused to go home. Most people were afraid that the country would be destroyed, and every day the police and the army took the leaders to jail. So they
What I do?
I don't have that. Because this may have.
Yeah, but
No, I don't have it. So the police would arrest the leaders of this protest. So they asked Bill to come up with a great plan to help them. Next chapter is Tinsipen. To West Kingston, there was a great swamp called Tinsipen, which was useless. It covered hundreds of acres, and Claude Bell was called in to make the swamp dry. Many people said that was a joke. He reminded them that there had been swamps on the road to the hotel, but he cleared all those swamps and caused a good road to be built just before World War II. While many people did not believe he could do this, the poor people trusted Clark Bell. He arranged to give thousands of jobs to people who wished to help to clear those swamps and cause a good road to be built just before World War II. No man or woman would work every week. One set of persons would work for a week or two, then another would come in, so they would alternate shifts. Then the first set of persons will return, and this so they alternate. In this way, thousands of people were able to earn some money. So this was like the first national work program that everyone would benefit from national projects. One of the first. It wouldn't be the first because there was infrastructure being built before. Teams of men would dig long trenches across the swamp, then others would cut a big trench to the edge of the swamp. Sometimes there would be excitement when they saw crocodiles. This was where, however, every day they saw frogs, crabs, shrimps, and wild ducks. Jamaicans love to eat crabs and shrimps and ducks. Most of the time, they found nothing, but they dug trenches while working in the hot sun. Next chapter, the miracle of dry land. The strongest men worked in quarry digging stones. The stones were spread in the mud to raise the level and allow the water to run off. Soon, all of the water was running into the trenches and dry land appeared. People thought this was like a miracle when they built a road called Foreshore Road to the south. It was below Maypen Cemetery and joined the Great Crossroad where Hagley Park Road met Spanish Town Road. The place was named 3 Miles because it was 3 miles from the center of Kingston, later named Marcus Garvey Drive. Next chapter. Crops on new dry land. What would happen to the workers after the swamps were made into dry land? Claude Bellard answered. He allowed each person to bring his family plant food on a small part of land since the land had been underwater for many years. It was rich and produced a lot of food. Every dry land was very useful. People built many factories on it, and new wharves for the city of Kingston were built there too. In the middle, they also built a few runways for planes so that everyone did not have to go to the big airport, which was 15 kilometers from Kingston. The runway was now in the Tinson Penn Airport. Final chapter on Claude Bell is finding water. Claude Bell could not only drain water, he also find water. He said that it was a special gift from God. Whenever people wished to find water, they would visit him and hold a stick over the land. If the stick shook in his hand, they could dig below that spot to find water. Sometimes the stick shook so hard it flew from his hand. Many people did not believe that this was true. In 1940, when the land of Antigua had no water, he was asked to go there with a special stick. He found water and the people were very happy. Well, he returned to Jamaica and helped many more people to find water. He did not ask them to pay him because it was a gift from God, and he believed that if he charged money, he would lose the gift. When he retired, they decided to honor him and gave him the name and gave his name to one of the main roads in the new land he created. If you visit a factory to the west of Kingston, you will see the name Claude Bell there. And now you know why the name is there. That's Claude Bell. And the next biography is that of Sir Harold Allen. And that's a portrait of Sir Harold Allen, and he was the first native knight. So he was knighted by the king. So it says, for many years, Jamaica was ruled by the British. The highest honor of the British was to be a knight and to be called Sir instead of Mr. Over the years, Jamaica longed to see one of their own receive this honor. This honor came in 1948 to a school teacher born in Portland by the name of Harold Egbert Allen. His father was also a teacher, and young Allen came first in the island when he took the examination to enter Michael Teacher Training College in Kingston. At Michael, he was a fast bowler and became captain of the cricket team. He continued to help cricket even after he became famous. Next chapter, his love for studies. He liked to study and talked about what he learned from his teachers and other students. That is why he formed the debating society at Michael. This became very famous and many people praised young Mr. Allen. He returned to Portland to teach and help the poor of his parish. He became a parish chancellor and got all the parish councils in Jamaica to join together. This was very successful, and since 1934, they have been meeting every year. He became so powerful that in 1935, he was elected to represent the parish in the government in Kingston. After that, he never lost an election. He also built the Capitol Cinema in Port Antonio, the first movie house outside of Kingston. Next chapter. He was not afraid. In those days, an English governor had ruled Jamaica because they were not independent as yet. Many believed that the English would harm you if you spoke about the bad conditions in Jamaica. And so they were silent. Harold Allen from Portland, however, was not afraid. He always asked that the poor people had been helped. No one harmed him, and the officials soon found that so bright he was sent overseas on many occasions to do business for Jamaica. Speaking in Geneva, he went to London, the capital of England. He met men who were in charge of Jamaica. He also went to Geneva in Europe, and Geneva is in Switzerland. Switzerland, yeah. And he went there to a meeting of the United Nations. Geneva is a great city in the Alps mountain, and the Alps is the highest mountain range in Europe. It's found between Switzerland, France, and Italy. This place is very far from the sea, but the most important people go there to hold meetings. What happens today? Meetings in Geneva is a very common occurrence within the UN and the EU. Mr. Harold Allen was the head of a team from the entire British West Indies, which would now be like what we call the CARICOM or CARIFTA. They discussed development of religion in Geneva, where he had spoken. All agreed that he was a great man. So once again, this is a great Jamaican on the world stage, a great Jamaican diplomat, also coming from the parish of Porter. Um, so he was always asking the government to provide jobs for people. In 1938, people caused strikes and some were killed while others were jailed. Mr. Allen told the government if they had taken his advice, there would not have been any problems. Next chapter is the right to vote. In 1944, it was decided that every Jamaican over the age of 21 would be allowed to vote. Before that, people needed to own land or have big jobs to get on the voters list. And this so-called universal adult suffrage, which was granted in 1994, is a big thing. They talk about it in schools all the time, but this is why it came about. Only people on the voters list could vote. Now, everyone would have the right to vote as long as he or she had reached the age of 21. In the first election, with the new voters list, only two men were re-elected to Parliament. One of them was Harold Allen of Portland, and the other was Reverend Felix Blitch of Hanover. The people decided to make a big change. Allen continued to work even harder. Final chapter on Harold Allen. Harold is knighted. In 1948, Jamaica was very excited to learn that the King of England had made him a knight. He became Sir Harold Allen. His wife Idris became Lady Allen. They went to the throne room at Buckingham Palace in London. The king drew his sword and tapped him on the shoulder and said, I dub thee, Sir Knight. When he returned to Jamaica, thousands of people came to congratulate him and thank God for giving us such a great Jamaican. The next person, the first female in today's list of great Jamaican is Una Morrison. I knew of this person before. So Una Morrison is a great, great woman, and we will see why in the following pages. She lived from 1905 to 1965, so that's 60 years. The girl from Santa Cruz. Santa Cruz is one of the earliest towns found in Jamaica. It was settled by the Spaniards 100 years ago. Santa Cruz is a Spanish word, so it's like Saint Cross or Holy Cross. So it's dedicated to the cross on which Jesus died. The name Santa Cruz means Holy Cross in Spanish, the language spoken by the Spaniards. Santa Cruz is the second largest town in the parish of St. Elizabeth today. Well, this book is probably older. It's probably a bit dated, but Santa Cruz is actually the largest town in St. Elizabeth, but it's not the capital, but it's larger than Black River, which would have been larger back then. In 1905, a little girl born to Reverend Mr. Marson and his wife at the Baptist Mains, Santa Cruz. Her name was Una, and she was very bright. She came first in the primary school examinations in the parish of St. Elizabeth and entered Hampton High, which is an all-girls school, the old school, which is located in the hills, and this is in Malvern near Monroe College. Santa Cruz is on the plains and it's very hot. Santa Cruz is recorded as the hottest town in Jamaica. Una Morrison was a great typist. Una studied very hard. When she left school, she became one of the fastest typists in Jamaica, and she found a job quickly. She loved to read and write. She wrote many poems and short stories. However, she noticed that people would not give her credit and would say she's only a girl. So she was a poet, and she's known for writing one of the most famous songs / speeches of all time. And we'll get to that. She's only a girl. At that time, women were not encouraged to do important work. In 1928, she went to Kingston to call a meeting of all girls and women who worked in offices. She told them they would form a group and ask for better conditions. She knew that women could work as well as men. And they should get the same pay as men. Many women believed her, but they were afraid. After this, the owners of the business listened to her, and many women got more pay for their work. He started a magazine for women, and it she put her poems and story about Jamaican life. It was one of the first magazines started by a woman. Many people liked it, and copies were sent overseas to people who were enjoying hearing good things about Jamaica. She tried to develop Jamaican's culture, and she wrote a play named Pocomena. This play was written in the language of the ordinary Jamaican, and many people did not like that. In spite of that, people who saw the play said they enjoyed it, and they thanked Miss Marson for having the courage to write a real Jamaican thing. Others were just as happy that a woman could produce such great works. She became successful, and she decided she wanted to learn more about the wider world, so she went to live in London. Una works at the BBC. In London, there was a radio station called the BBC, or British Broadcasting Commission. It was one of the first radio stations in the world. It sent message to all parts of the British Empire, and millions of people listened to it. There was no radio stations in most countries like Jamaica, and the most news about Britain radio station is still in London today. The BBC hired Miss Una Morrison to broadcast to the world, so she became the first woman to do that job. So she was even a pioneer in the British in British media. Imagine a little black girl from Santa Cruz, Jamaica, being the first person on British media, the first female, I should say, and first female of color on British media. So she was again a pioneer. South America, Australia, we hear her voice and they like it. They asked which country did she come from. When they heard it was Jamaica, they were surprised. They did not know that a little island, Jamaica, could produce such a famous person. Una Morrison worked with Haile Selassie I. Una Morrison was also interested in politics and improving the condition of all peoples whose ancestors were from Africa. While she was still in London, Ethiopia was attacked by the Italian army. The emperor of Ethiopia, Haile Selassie, had to leave Ethiopia and live in London. He started to work to regain his throne, and Marshall worked with him. In 1935, the leaders of the world gathered in Geneva, Switzerland, to discuss business. The Emperor of Ethiopia, Haile Selassie, went there and made a great speech asking for justice. His speech caused people to think again about the attacks on Ethiopia, which had one of the earliest thrones in the world, much older than England and those in Europe. After this, many countries helped Haile Selassie. After many trials, he returned to Ethiopia. And this poem is War. It's re-sung by Bob Marley. It was written by Una Mars, and it was presented by His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie at the League of Nations, which became the UN. So that poem should is credited to Una Morrison. And it's like the point where said, until the philosophy that holds one race superior and another inferior is finally and permanently discredited and abandoned, until the color of a man's skin is of no more significance than the color of his eye, of international morality will remain but a fleeting illusion to be pursued but not attained. And back to the life of Una Morrison, a girl not afraid of danger. Most of his speeches were written, and she had to work very hard to understand many languages to do her job. It was very dangerous because the Italians had invaded Ethiopia. The Italians were a very rich and powerful country because you know the Italian have the Italian mafia. They had the legacy of the Roman Empire, the papacy. The papacy is in Italy. Italy is the home of the Latin language, so the Italians influence all of European culture because the Italians would have learned from the Greeks who started European civilization, and they had become the home of the entire Western chain of thought. So Italy was a very powerful country back then. So she was not afraid. She wrote many letters and other documents to help the emperor. During the Second World War, she continued to live in London when many bombs were falling in the city. She made many broadcasts on BBC to the people around the world, supporting the fight against Germany and Italy. Her main interest was to get the Italians to leave Ethiopia so that the emperor could return to Addis Ababa, where he had his throne. The Americans and the British won the war in 1945, and the Italians had to leave Ethiopia. There was a great rejoicing when His Imperial Majesty the Emperor left London and returned to the kingdom in Ethiopia. The Emperor said he could not succeed without the help of Una Morrison, that little girl from Santa Cruz who became world famous. So, if you didn't know, now you know about Una Morrison. The second female is Bishop Mary Core. Mary Core. And she lived from 1905 to 1964. It says Bishop Mary Core. Some people come to know Jesus Christ after a life of sin, but others accept him in childhood and live their entire lives as Christians. In the hills of St. Anne, near the center of the island, there is a beautiful, cool place known as Brownstone. If you go there and look towards the north, you can see a long portion of seashore with a coast of sand the color of gold. On a clear day, you can look across the water and see mountains of Cuba in the distance, about 100 miles away. There are many churches in Broadstone. Most of them were built by poor people in the hills. They put their savings together to build places of worship to the glory of God. And fun fact, Jamaica is the place with the most churches per square mile in the world. Among these live some four farmers, Mr. and Mrs. Frederick Poor, and their daughter Mary. About 1900, when Mary was 10, she accepted the Lord and started preaching, healing hands. Once she prayed beside of a sick man in closing him and asked the Lord to bless him. At that moment, he felt better, and then he was healed. The people knew that little Mary was a very special girl, and they gave praises to God. That time, an English Baptist minister, Reverend Reginald Phillips, knew Mary's parents very well. He liked to preach in the streets to the people who refused to visit the church. When he heard the little girl Mary Cord preach, he was an old man, and he believed that she was specifically sent from God. They started preaching as a teen and went from parish to parish. Their first church was built near Boardwalk in the hills of St. Catherine. Next chapter, Feeding the Poor. They decided that they should not only preach in the country, but in Kingston, the biggest city in Jamaica. The crowds were so large that they agreed to make Kingston their main center. They noticed that there were many poor people who had nothing to eat. In the country, there are many poor people, but they always find food from their fields to eat. Mary and Rev Phillips prayed to God to help them to find food for the people, and God provided it through kind people who wanted to help. Soon they established a regular kitchen and fed thousands of people. This was their true mission, and they named it the City Mission Church in 1924. The center was at Blount Street in Hannatown in the inner city in West Kingston. One day, Reverend Reginald Phillips took ill while people were in a pool waiting to be baptized. And Mary had a vision that the Lord was calling her name. She entered the pool and baptized them. In the 1920s, women could not become pastors in the church nor hold very important positions. From that day, Mary became the first female pastor in a Jamaican church. Mary preaches overseas. After Reverend Philip died in 1930, Mary became the bishop of the church, and it expanded greatly. People flocked to find jobs in Kingston, and many more needed help. The crowds at the City Mission Church grew larger and larger. Mary had another vision. It was to help Jamaicans who was gone overseas. She visited them in Belize, the United States, Britain, and Canada. The crowds were even larger than Jamaica. She still had the power of God to heal, and many people received the blessing through her. Mary Core from the town of Brownstone built large churches on four of those countries. She lived a Christian life from her childhood until she died a old woman in 1964. She's a good example to all Jamaicans today. Her church continues to help poor, sick, and homeless people in Jamaica today. And I'm not sure if I show you a portrait um, of yeah, Bishop Mary Gore. That's her. That's her portrait. And this one is Reverend Percival Gibson. This is his portrait. He lived from 1893. It says Lord Bishop Percival Gibson. When Percival Gibson was born near to Kingston Race Course in 1983, only rich boys could go to secondary school. His father worked with the KSAC, that's Kingston and St. Andrew Corporation, and had very little money. In 1970, he won the first scholarship offered by St. George's College. Even though he was 14 years old, he was allowed to enter. He was so bright that he never scored less than 90% in any exam. And his two sisters told everyone that he was the brightest boy in Jamaica. He was short and small, but he had a strong will. His mother was from St. Elizabeth, and she always warned him not to lose his temper. Percival reads Pilgrim's Progress. When he was 17, he decided to become an Anglican priest. He studied hard and earned three university degrees, even though he never went to a university. He read two books in which changed his life. The first was Pilgrim's Progress, and the second was The City of God. He decided to become a pilgrim for God and to make Kingston a city of God. He often said that Kingston was the wickedest city in the world and had a vision, and his vision was to change that. In 1925, he decided that Kingston needed a good secondary school that poor people could afford, and he founded Kingston College with his own money. As the school grew larger, the Anglican Church took it over and it became the largest school in Jamaica. He used the boys to stage large outdoor plays which are so successful that King George V of England honored him with a medal. Percival becomes a bishop. He kept preaching against the wickedness of the city, and in 1947 he became Jamaica's first bishop of Kingston. Before that, all Anglican bishops were from England, and the people felt that no Jamaican was good enough to be bishop. He was such a good bishop that in 1950 he was named Lord Bishop of Jamaica. After this, all the Caribbean islands started to appoint local bishops, and they said that Jamaica's Bishop Gibson was their pioneer. They have a school called Bishop Gibson in in Mandeville, Manchester, and the sister school of Bishop Gibson is the Carter College, and Bishop Gibson found Kingston College. What do these three schools all have in the color purple, which is also adorning the Anglican bishops at that time. So Bishop Gibson, the Carter College, and Kingston College are sister schools. For 300 years, the Church of England was known as the Anglican Church, and he decided that the word Anglican meant English, and we are Jamaicans, so the name should be changed. He got the signal of the church to change the name to the Church in Jamaica in the province of the West Indies. This is the name it has today, and it received the name because of the vision of a little boy from Kingston. So Anglican just basically means Church of England. Many people believe that he was a true servant of God, and the church expanded greatly while he was a leader. Also, from 1950, Kingston College was producing the winners of most scholarship and almost all of the sports trophies. And Kingston is a top school in Jamaica today, like the best of the best. Cups in athletics, Sunlight Cups, cricket, Manning Cups, Olivia Shields in football. The government decided to give him a seat in the legislature. They wanted his advice to improve the schools in Jamaica. Bishop Gibson starts new schools. With all these jobs, he decided to form new schools and founded Bishop Gibson High School in Mandeville, Glenmuir High in Maypen, Churches Teachers College in Mandeville. All of these schools had to teach about the kingdom of God and the importance of leading a Christian life. He raised some of the money by traveling to England, where they had heard little of the bishop from Jamaica. Later, McGill University in Canada named him a Doctor of Divinity. This made him Dr. Percival Giggs. All Jamaicans were very proud of him because he was providing for the poor Jamaicans, proving that poor Jamaicans do many great things if they ask for God's help and work hard. An expert is a very bright person. Dr. Gibson said that he was not an expert, but everyone knew he was an expert in English history, Roman history, European history, Latin, Greek, Hebrew, French philosophy, English literature. Whenever they saw him, they would remember the poem, and still they wonder that one small could carry all he knew. When they asked him which part of scripture he liked best, and they quoted from the prophet Micah, he had sown thee, O man, what is good, and what thou, Lord, required of thee, but to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with thy God. He had learned these while attending Sunday school in St. Luke's Church in Crossroad. He lived a long life of hard work since that time. We know Jamaicans have the ability to run large churches. So that's today's book, Great Jamaicans, Book One. Hope you love that little history lesson, little civics lesson. Going through it for the first time with everyone watching this stream. I enjoyed it, so hope you did.